The briefing room fell silent when she walked in. Rear Admiral Marcus Webb had seen thousands of aviators in his 30-year career, but the woman standing before him didn't fit any profile he recognized. Her flight suit hung slightly loose on her frame, worn at the elbows, her boots scuffed in a way that suggested endless hours on tarmac rather than parade grounds. She carried a tablet under one arm and a travel mug that had seen better days. Webb's aide had told him her name was Lieutenant Commander Kestrel Vance, recently transferred from a coastal patrol squadron nobody had heard of. Single mother, 2 kids, flying cargo routes and search and rescue missions for the past 8 years. Not exactly the resume that screamed tactical genius. The briefing was supposed to be routine, a formality before the joint operation commenced. SEAL Team 7 needed air support for an extraction in the Kachin Highlands, terrain so unforgiving that 3 previous missions had been scrubbed due to weather and visibility. Webb had requested their best pilot. Instead, he got her. "Lieutenant Commander Vance," Webb said, not bothering to hide his skepticism. "I've read your file, impressive flight hours, but this operation requires someone with combat experience, not someone who's been flying groceries to islands." She met his gaze without flinching, her dark eyes calm. There was something in that look, something that made Webb pause. It wasn't defiance. It wasn't pride. It was the expression of someone who had heard every variation of this speech before and had long since stopped caring. "With respect, Admiral," she said, her voice carrying the faint rasp of too many early mornings, "I've logged more mountain approach hours in adverse conditions than most of your combat pilots have total flight time. The Aleutian chain doesn't forgive mistakes either." Webb leaned back in his chair. The other officers in the room exchanged glances. Captain Reeves, his operations officer, cleared his throat. "Sir, if I may, her simulator scores are exceptional, and her actual flight record—" "Simulator scores," Webb interrupted, "don't mean much when you're taking fire at 9,000 feet in zero visibility." Kestrel didn't respond immediately. She simply set down her tablet, pulled a worn photograph from her pocket and placed it on the table. 2 children, a boy and a girl, grinning at the camera. "I fly every mission like I'm coming home to them," she said quietly. "That makes me careful, not timid, careful." Webb studied the photograph, then her face. There was a story here buried beneath the surface. He could feel it. The mission clock showed 72 hours until insertion. The Kachin Highlands stretched across the border region like a spine of broken teeth, mountains rising above 14,000 feet, valleys choked with monsoon mist that turned solid one moment and vanished the next. Intelligence had located the asset, an undercover operative who'd been dark for 6 days, his last transmission fragmentary and desperate. The extraction window was narrow, 4 hours of marginally acceptable weather before the next storm system rolled in. Webb had lost good people in these mountains before. He wasn't eager to repeat the experience. The tactical briefing began at 0600. Kestrel arrived 15 minutes early, already studying the topographical maps spread across the operations table. Webb watched her trace potential approach vectors with one finger, her lips moving silently as she calculated angles and airspeeds. She'd pulled her dark hair back in a regulation bun, but a few strands had escaped, falling across her forehead. She brushed them aside absently, focused entirely on the terrain. "The primary LZ is compromised," she said without preamble when Webb approached. "This ridgeline channels wind sheer from 3 directions. You'll get microburst conditions that'll slam a helicopter into the mountain before the pilot knows what's happening." Webb frowned. "That LZ was selected by our best tactical analysts." "Your analysts aren't pilots," Kestrel replied, still studying the map. "See this secondary valley, wider approach, better escape routes if things go sideways. The terrain masks it from the northern observation posts. You lose 15 minutes on infill time, but you gain survivability." Captain Reeves joined them, coffee in hand. "The secondary valley puts us closer to hostile patrol routes." "Everything in this region is close to hostile patrol routes," Kestrel said. She finally looked up from the map. "Admiral, you brought me here because someone thought I could do this job. Either trust that judgment or send me home to my kids." But if we're doing this, we're doing it smart. The room went quiet. Nobody spoke to a rear admiral that way, especially not a lieutenant commander from a backwater patrol squadron. Webb felt his jaw tighten. Then, surprisingly, he smiled. It was a thin smile, more acknowledgement than warmth. "Show me your plan," he said. Kestrel pulled out her tablet, connecting it to the briefing room display. A three-dimensional rendering of the terrain appeared, rotating slowly. She'd already run multiple simulations, her proposed approach route highlighted in blue. "We go in at night," she began. "High-altitude insertion, using the terrain to mask our approach. The MH-60 has the range if we push it, and the infrared signature stays low if we keep the engines in optimal thermal range. I'll need your SEAL team stripped to essential gear only. Every pound matters at this altitude." Webb studied the route. It was aggressive, threading between peaks with margins that would make most pilots nervous. But it was also brilliant, exploiting gaps in the hostile radar coverage that he hadn't noticed. "Weather window?" he asked. "Tight," Kestrel admitted. "We launch at 2200. We have approximately 4 hours before the next front moves in. After that, we're grounded for 36 hours minimum, which means the asset is probably dead. And if we encounter hostiles during extraction, then I fly like my children are waiting for me at home," she said simply. "Because they are." The SEAL team leader, Lieutenant Commander Jake Hardison, had been listening from the back of the room. He stepped forward now, his weathered face skeptical. "Ma'am, no disrespect, but I've lost friends in these mountains. I need to know you can handle this." Kestrel turned to face him directly. "What's your call sign, Lieutenant Commander?" "Hardison, Jake Hardison." "No," she said patiently. "Your call sign." He hesitated. "Anvil." "Anvil," she repeated. "Because you're solid, dependable. Heavy when needed. Everyone who flies has a call sign that tells their story. Mine tells mine." Webb felt something shift in the room. "And what's your call sign, Lieutenant Commander Vance?" For the first time since entering the briefing room, Kestrel smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of someone remembering pain so clearly that it never really faded. "Revenant," she said quietly. The word hung in the air like smoke. Webb felt the temperature in the room drop. He'd been in the military long enough to know that call signs earned in combat told stories that official files never captured. And Revenant was not a call sign given lightly. It meant someone who'd come back from death, someone who refused to stay down, someone who haunted the skis like a ghost that wouldn't rest. "Explain," Webb said, his voice softer now. Kestrel's smile faded. She looked down at the map again, but Webb could tell she wasn't seeing the terrain anymore. She was somewhere else, some other mountain range, some other mission that had carved her call sign into her soul. "8 years ago," she began, "I was flying search and rescue in the North Atlantic. Winter storm, Category 4 winds, waves 40 feet high. A fishing vessel went down with 6 crew aboard. Command was ready to scrub the mission, declare it unsurvivable. I went anyway." She paused, her hand tightening on the edge of the table. "I found 5 of them, pulled them from the water one by one. The helicopter took damage, lost hydraulics, lost instruments. My co-pilot was screaming at me to abort, but there was one more out there, one more." "Did you find him?" Reeves asked quietly. "Her," Kestrel corrected. 19-year-old girl, first time at sea. "I found her clinging to debris 3 miles from the wreck site. By then my helicopter was dying. We'd lost so much hydraulic fluid that the controls were barely responding. The storm was trying to slam us into the ocean every 10 seconds. I got her into the cabin, strapped her in, and then the hydraulics failed completely." Kestrel's voice was steady, but Webb could hear the weight beneath the words. "We went down hard, hit the water at 60 knots. The helicopter flipped, started sinking immediately. My co-pilot got out. 4 of the rescued crew got out. The girl and I were trapped in the back." She met Webb's eyes again. "We were 30 feet underwater when I got her free, but by then my lungs were screaming. The surface looked like a mile away. I should have drowned. Everyone said I should have drowned, but I kept swimming, kept pushing her toward the light. And when I broke the surface, when I pulled her up with me, my co-pilot said I looked like something that had clawed its way back from hell." The briefing room was absolutely silent. 3 days later," Kestrel continued, "when I returned to my squadron, someone had painted a new name on my locker, Revenant. The ghost who wouldn't die. The pilot who refused to leave anyone behind. She picked up the photograph of her children, studying their faces. That girl I pulled from the water, she's a marine biologist now, sends me Christmas cards every year. And these two, she tapped the photo, they're the reason I fly like death can't catch me, because it already tried once, and I won. Webb stood slowly. The skepticism had vanished from his face, replaced by something else. Respect, maybe, or recognition. "Lieutenant Commander Vance," he said formally, "you have operational command of this mission. Whatever you need, you get it." Kestrel nodded once. "I'll need 2 hours with the helicopter. I want to personally inspect every system, every instrument, and I want to meet every member of the SEAL team. I need to know their weights, their gear loads, their capabilities. If I'm getting them in and out, I need to know exactly what I'm carrying." "Done," Webb said. "Anything else?" "Yes, sir," Kestrel said, and now there was steel in her voice. "When we launch tonight, nobody questions my decisions in the air. Not you, not tactical command, not God himself. In that cockpit, I'm the only authority that matters, because I'll be the one keeping your men alive." Hardison stepped forward, extending his hand. "I can work with that, Revenant." She shook it firmly. "Good. Because we're about to fly into hell, Anvil, and I plan on flying back out." The hours before launch moved with the strange, compressed urgency of pre-combat preparation. Kestrel spent 90 minutes with the MH-60M Seahawk, crawling through its systems with the intensity of a surgeon examining a patient. The crew chief, a grizzled master sergeant named Tors, watched her with growing approval as she checked hydraulic lines, tested control surfaces, and personally verified the fuel calculations. "You know your way around a bird," Tors observed. "I know my way around staying alive," Kestrel replied, running her hand along the rotor assembly. "This helicopter is going to face wind shear, possible small arms fire, and zero visibility navigation at altitude. I need to trust it completely." "She's solid, ma'am. I'd stake my life on her." Kestrel glanced at him. "You are, Sergeant. We all are." She moved to the cockpit, settling into the pilot's seat. Her hands found the controls automatically, muscle memory taking over. She closed her eyes briefly, breathing slowly. This was her meditation, her prayer. The feeling of the cyclic stick under her palm, the collective at her left hand, the pedals beneath her feet. Every control was an extension of her will, every instrument a voice telling her the helicopter's secrets. Tors leaned in through the door. "Ma'am, can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "Why do this? You've got kids waiting at home. You could request a transfer, take a desk job. Nobody would blame you." Kestrel opened her eyes, staring out at the darkening sky beyond the hangar. "Because somebody has to fly the missions that matter, and because I'm good at it. My kids understand that their mom does something important, something that brings people home." "And if you don't come home?" Tors asked quietly. "Then they'll know I died doing exactly what I was meant to do," she said. "That's more than most people get." At 1900 hours, the SEAL team assembled in the ready room. 8 men, each one a specialist in their field, each one carrying the weight of dozens of successful operations. Hardison introduced them one by one. Kestrel memorized every name, every face, every specification of gear weight. These weren't just cargo to her. They were sons, brothers, fathers. They were the reason the mission mattered. "Gentlemen," she said when the introductions were complete, "tonight we're flying into conditions that would scrub most operations. The weather is marginal, the terrain is unforgiving, the hostile presence is significant, but we have one advantage they don't expect." "What's that?" one of the SEALs asked. "Me," Kestrel said simply. "I've flown in conditions that would kill most pilots. I've brought helicopters home when they should have been tombstones. And tonight I'm going to get you in, get your asset, and get you out, but I need your trust. When I say move, you move. When I say hold, you freeze. In that helicopter, my word is law, clear." "Clear, ma'am," Hardison said, and the others echoed him. Kestrel nodded. "Good. We launch in 3 hours. Use the time wisely. Call your families if you need to. Pray if that's your thing. And remember, the enemy thinks these mountains belong to them. Tonight we're going to prove them wrong." Webb watched from the doorway as the SEAL team dispersed. Kestrel remained behind, staring at the mission map on the wall. He approached quietly. "Second thoughts?" he asked. Never, Kestrel said, but I won't lie to you, Admiral. This is going to be close. Everything has to go perfectly. And if it doesn't, then I improvise, she said. That's what revenants do. We refuse to die. Webb studied her profile in the harsh fluorescent light. I owe you an apology. I judged you before I knew you. Most people do, Kestrel said without bitterness. I'm used to it. For what it's worth, Webb continued, I've commanded operations all over the world. I've worked with the best pilots in every service branch. And right now, watching you prepare for this mission, I genuinely believe you might be the best I've ever seen. Kestrel turned to look at him, surprise flickering across her face. That means something coming from you. Just bring my men home, Revenant. That's all I ask. That's all I ever do, Admiral, she said. That's all I ever do. At 2200 hours, the MH-60M lifted from the airfield, its rotors cutting through the night air with a rhythmic thump that echoed across the base. Kestrel's hands moved across the controls with fluid precision, adjusting collective and cyclic as the helicopter climbed. Beside her, her co-pilot, Lieutenant Marcus Flynn, monitored instruments and maintained radio contact with base. Condor 17, you are clear for departure vector, the tower transmitted. Copy that, tower, Flynn replied. Condor 17 departing on mission vector. Kestrel banked the helicopter east, toward the mountains that rose like dark teeth against the starlit sky. In the cabin behind her, the SEAL team sat in disciplined silence, each man lost in his own pre-mission mental preparation. Hardison caught her eye in the mirror, gave her a slight nod. She returned it. The flight to the Highlands would take 90 minutes at their planned airspeed. Kestrel kept the helicopter low, following valleys and using terrain masking to avoid radar detection. The night vision system painted the world in shades of green, transforming the darkness into a navigable landscape. Every ridge, every peak, every potential threat stood out with crystal clarity. Weather update, Flynn said, reading from his tablet. Front is moving faster than predicted. We've got maybe 3.5 hours instead of 4. That's fine, Kestrel said calmly. We'll be faster than expected too. She pushed the throttle forward slightly, increasing airspeed. The helicopter responded instantly, surging through the night air. Below them, the terrain began to rise, foothills giving way to serious mountains. Kestrel adjusted altitude, climbing to match the elevation changes, always keeping terrain between them and potential observation posts. 40 minutes into the flight, the radio crackled. Condor 17, Overwatch. We're picking up radio chatter indicating possible hostile patrol activity near your insertion point. Recommend standby for reassessment. Kestrel's jaw tightened. Negative, Overwatch. We maintain mission timeline. Provide continuous updates on hostile positions. There was a pause. Then Webb's voice came through. Revenant, this is Admiral Webb. Are you sure about this? Admiral, Kestrel said, her voice steady, we have a narrow window. If we abort now, the asset is lost. I can thread this. Trust me. Another pause. Then, proceed, Condor 17. You have tactical authority. Copy that, Kestrel said. She glanced at Flynn. Mark hostile positions on the tactical display. Flynn's fingers moved across the screen, updating their navigation system with enemy locations based on signal intelligence. Red dots appeared on Kestrel's heads-up display, clustered around the primary insertion point. She studied them for 3 seconds, her mind racing through calculations of approach angles, timing, and risk factors. We're going in from the north, she announced. Hardison, prep your team. Infill in 15 minutes. Copy, Revenant, Hardison's voice came through the intercom. The mountains grew larger, closer, more menacing. Wind buffeted the helicopter, and Kestrel made constant tiny adjustments to keep them stable. This was the dance she knew better than anything else, the eternal negotiation between aircraft and atmosphere, between human will and natural force. At 10,000 feet, they entered the cloud layer. Visibility dropped to nothing. The world outside the cockpit became a wall of gray mist, impenetrable and disorienting. Flynn's instruments became their only reference, the only thing standing between controlled flight and catastrophic spatial disorientation. Altitude 10,200, Flynn called out. Airspeed 120 knots, vertical speed 500 feet per minute. Kestrel flew by pure instrument reference now, trusting the gauges more than her own senses. This was where lesser pilots died, where the body's equilibrium lied and said the helicopter was straight when it was actually in a deadly spiral. But Kestrel had done this 1,000 times. The instruments were her truth, and she obeyed them absolutely. They burst through the cloud layer at 12,000 feet. The world reappeared suddenly, a landscape of moonlit peaks and deep shadows. Kestrel immediately oriented herself, picking out landmarks she'd memorized from the maps. There, the double peak that marked the northern approach. There, the hanging glacier that reflected starlight. There, the valley that would lead them to the extraction point. 5 minutes, she announced. Behind her, she heard the SEALs conducting final gear checks, the soft clicks and rustles of professionals preparing for action. Hardison moved forward to the cockpit, leaning between the pilots to study the terrain ahead. "I see the valley," he said. "Looks tighter than the map suggested." "It is," Kestrel agreed, "but it's our best approach. The walls will mask our rotor noise until we're almost on top of the LZ. And if we take fire, then I'll show you why they call me Revenant," Kestrel said. Hardison grinned despite the tension. "Looking forward to it, ma'am." The helicopter descended into the valley, walls of rock rising on either side. Kestrel's hands moved constantly on the controls, making microscopic adjustments to keep them centered in the narrow space. One mistake here, one gust of wind at the wrong moment, and they'd slam into stone hard enough to vaporize metal and flesh alike. Flynn's breathing had accelerated slightly. Kestrel noticed but said nothing. Fear was natural. It was what you did with the fear that mattered. 30 seconds to LZ, she said calmly. Hardison opened the door. The cabin door slid open with a metallic rumble. Cold mountain air rushed in, carrying the scent of snow and stone. The SEAL team lined up, ready to fast-rope down the moment the helicopter hovered. Kestrel brought the MH-60M into a hover 20 feet above the rocky ground. The landing zone was barely large enough, surrounded by boulders and scrub vegetation. But it was there, and it was clear. "Go, go, go," Hardison commanded. The SEALs dropped through the night on thick ropes, disappearing into the shadows below. Kestrel held the helicopter perfectly steady despite gusting wind, despite the marginal air density at this altitude, despite every instinct that screamed this was impossible. In 45 seconds, all 8 SEALs were on the ground. "We're clear," Hardison transmitted, moving to asset location. "Copy," Kestrel said. "I'll be holding at Rally Point Alpha. Call when you need extract." "Understood, Revenant. Anvil out." Kestrel lifted the helicopter, banking away from the valley. Flynn exhaled slowly. "That was intense." "That was the easy part," Kestrel said. "Now we wait, and waiting is always harder than flying." She positioned the helicopter in a hover behind a ridgeline 3 kilometers from the LZ, invisible to anyone in the valley but close enough to respond instantly when called. The minutes crawled past with agonizing slowness. Below them, Hardison and his team were moving through hostile territory, every step a potential disaster. Radio remained silent except for brief, coded status updates. Anvil 1, Position 2. Anvil 1, Position 4. Anvil 1, target building in sight. Kestrel listened to each transmission with total focus. Flynn monitored the tactical frequency, tracking hostile radio chatter. So far, the enemy seemed unaware of their presence. That would change the moment extraction began. "Revenant, Anvil 1, Hardison's voice suddenly crackled through. "We have the asset. He's mobile but injured. Request immediate extract." "Copy, Anvil. Inbound to your position now." Kestrel pushed the cyclic forward, bringing the helicopter around the ridge. The valley appeared ahead, and now she could see movement, tiny figures running across open ground toward the extraction point. Behind them, muzzle flashes sparked in the darkness. "We're taking fire," Hardison reported, his voice tight but controlled. "Estimate 15 to 20 hostiles converging on our position." "Understood," Kestrel said. "Hold at the LZ. I'm 30 seconds out." She pushed the helicopter to maximum speed, the engines roaring, the airframe vibrating with the strain. Flynn gripped his seat as they dove into the valley at an angle that felt suicidal. 20 seconds. Tracer rounds began arcing through the darkness, searching for them. Kestrel jinked left, then right, throwing off the gunner's aim. The helicopter danced through the air, responsive to her every command. 10 seconds. The LZ appeared ahead, and she could see the SEAL team now, 8 men in tactical formation surrounding a ninth figure, the extracted asset. They were firing back at pursuers, buying time. Kestrel brought the helicopter into a hover directly over them, and the SEALs didn't wait for an invitation. They scrambled aboard, hauling the asset up through the door, everyone moving with desperate speed. "We're taking hits," Flynn shouted. Red warning lights began illuminating on the instrument panel. Kestrel felt the controls shudder as rounds struck the fuselage. "Almost there," Hardison yelled. "Last man boarding now." A burst of automatic fire stitched across the helicopter's tail boom. More warning lights. The hydraulic pressure gauge dropped into the yellow zone. "We're aboard," Hardison shouted. "Go, go, go." Kestrel didn't need to be told twice. She pulled maximum collective, and the helicopter lurched upward, clawing for altitude. Behind them, the hostile fire intensified, but they were already climbing above the effective range. Except the helicopter wasn't responding correctly. The controls felt mushy, delayed. Kestrel's eyes scanned the instruments in a fraction of a second, assessing damage. Hydraulic system compromised. Tail rotor authority reduced. Fuel system showing pressure fluctuation. "We've got problems," Flynn said unnecessarily. "I can see that," Kestrel replied calmly. "We're not going back to base like this. I need an emergency landing zone." She pulled up the navigation display, studying terrain. They were still 30 miles from friendly territory, but there was a plateau ahead, flat enough for an emergency landing if they could make it that far. The helicopter shuddered violently. Another warning light, this one read, "Engine temperature rising." They'd taken damage to the cooling system. Kestrel ran calculations in her head. Distance versus fuel versus engine temperature versus hydraulic fluid loss. The numbers didn't look good. "Hardison," she called back. "How's the asset?" "Conscious. Leg wound, but stable." "Good, because we're going to have an exciting landing." Kestrel nursed the damaged helicopter forward, sacrificing speed for engine temperature management. Every second she expected complete hydraulic failure. Every second she expected the engine to seize. Every second was borrowed time. The plateau appeared ahead, a flat expanse of rock and snow glowing in the moonlight. Kestrel lined up her approach, but the helicopter was barely responding now. The hydraulic system was at critical low pressure. She was essentially flying a machine that weighed 8 tons with almost no power assistance on the controls. "Flynn," she said quietly, "when we touch down, be ready to shut down immediately. We might have a fuel leak." "Copy," Flynn replied, his voice tight. The plateau rushed up to meet them. Kestrel fought the controls, every muscle straining. The helicopter descended in a barely controlled fall, its nose rising as she pulled back on the cyclic with every ounce of strength she possessed. They hit hard. The landing gear absorbed most of the impact, but the jolt threw everyone against their restraints. Kestrel immediately began shutdown procedures, her hands flying across switches even as the rotors were still turning. "Everyone out," Hardison ordered. "Form a perimeter." The SEALs poured from the helicopter, weapons ready, scanning for threats. Kestrel completed the shutdown, and the rotor noise faded to silence. The sudden quiet was almost shocking. Climbed out of the cockpit, her legs unsteady. Flynn followed, both of them moving around the helicopter to assess damage. What they found was sobering. Dozens of bullet holes in the fuselage. The tail boom was shredded. Hydraulic fluid pooled beneath the aircraft. One of the fuel tanks showed signs of damage. "We're not flying this out," Flynn said. "No," Kestrel agreed. "We're not." She pulled out her radio. "Overwatch Condor 17. We are down at emergency LZ coordinates, transmitting now." "Repeat, we are down. Request immediate CSAR." "Copy, Condor 17, the response came. "Search and rescue is being scrambled, ETA 90 minutes. Kestrel closed her eyes briefly. 90 minutes on a plateau in hostile territory with a damaged helicopter and a wounded asset. It was going to be a long night. Hardison approached, his face grim. "How bad?" "Bad enough," Kestrel said. "We're here until rescue arrives." "Then we dig in," Hardison said. "My team knows how to hold ground." He turned to his men. "Defensive positions, 2-man teams. Overlapping fields of fire, expect company. The next hour passed in tense silence. The SEAL team established a perimeter around the helicopter, using rocks and the aircraft itself for cover. Kestrel and Flynn worked to secure sensitive equipment and prepare demolition charges, standard procedure to prevent technology from falling into enemy hands if they were overrun. The wounded asset, a CIA operative named Michael Brennan, sat propped against the helicopter's wheel. Despite his injury, he was alert and coherent. "You're the pilot?" He asked Kestrel. "That's right. That was some flying. I thought we were dead 3 times." "We're not dead until we stop breathing," Kestrel said, checking his bandaged leg. "How's the pain?" "Manageable," Brennan lied. She could see it in his face, the tight lines around his eyes. She pulled a morphine auto-injector from the medical kit. "This will help." "Save it," Brennan said. "If things get worse, you might need it for someone else." "If things get worse, we'll all need more than morphine," Kestrel replied, but she respected his refusal. Hardison approached from the perimeter. "We've got movement. Eastern approach. Multiple targets." Kestrel felt her pulse accelerate but kept her voice calm. "How many?" "Can't tell yet, but they're coming this way." She moved to the perimeter, lying prone behind a rock formation next to one of the SEALs, a young operator named Davis. Through her night vision, she could see figures moving across the landscape below the plateau, dark shapes against darker ground. "At least 20, Davis whispered. "Maybe more. They know we're here. They know something's here. They heard the helicopter." The hostile force spread out, beginning a cautious advance up the slope toward the plateau. Kestrel's mind raced. With the helicopter down, they had no mobility advantage. The SEAL team was formidable, but they were outnumbered and had limited ammunition, and rescue was still an hour away. "Hardison," she called softly. "Yes, ma'am. We need to convince them this position is more trouble than it's worth." "How?" Kestrel thought for a moment. "Do you have any illumination rounds?" "3. And smoke." "4 canisters." "Here's what we do," Kestrel said, quickly outlining a plan. Hardison listened, then grinned. "Revenant, you're either crazy or brilliant." "I'm a pilot," Kestrel said. "I'm definitely crazy, hopefully also brilliant." Hardison distributed orders to his team. They repositioned slightly, creating the illusion of a larger force. Kestrel returned to the helicopter, pulling equipment from the weapons locker. She wasn't a ground combatant, but she knew how to shoot. More importantly, she knew how to think tactically. The hostile force continued its advance, now within 300 meters. At Hardison's signal, the SEALs opened fire, not a sustained barrage but carefully aimed shots designed to force the enemy to cover. Simultaneously, they launched illumination rounds high into the air. The flares burst overhead, flooding the plateau and surrounding area with harsh white light. The hostiles froze, suddenly exposed, uncertain about what they were facing. In that moment of confusion, the SEALs launched smoke grenades toward the enemy position. Red smoke began billowing across the slope, creating the impression of marking rounds for artillery or air support. The hostiles broke. It wasn't a rout, but a tactical withdrawal, pulling back rapidly from what they now believed was a much larger, better supported force. Within minutes, they had disappeared back down the slope. "Overwatch Condor 17, Kestrel transmitted. "Hostile force has been repelled, but they'll regroup and come back. What's our ETA on rescue?" "CSAR is inbound, 30 minutes, 30 minutes. It felt like an eternity. The SEAL team remained alert, watching for the hostiles' return. Kestrel sat with her back against the helicopter, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had sustained her through the mission was beginning to fade, leaving behind the cold reality of their situation. Flynn sat down beside her. "You okay?" "I'm alive," she said. "That's a good start." "That plan with the illumination rounds, that was quick thinking." "I've had practice improvising," Kestrel said. She pulled out her phone, looking at the wallpaper image of her children. No signal here, obviously. They wouldn't even know anything had gone wrong. They'd be asleep in their beds, safe and warm, while their mother sat on a plateau halfway around the world, waiting to see if she'd make it home. "What are their names?" Flynn asked, nodding at the phone. "Emma and Christopher, 11 and 9. They must be proud of you." Kestrel smiled sadly. "They just want me to come home. They don't care about medals or missions. They care about bedtime stories and soccer games and normal mom things." But you do this anyway. I do this so they can grow up in a world where people like Michael Brennan can operate, where intelligence can be gathered, where threats can be countered. I do this because someone has to, and I happen to be very good at it." The distant sound of rotors reached them then, growing steadily louder. Two HH-60 Pave Hawks appeared over the ridge, their thermal cameras sweeping the plateau. "Condor 17, this is Rescue 11. We have you visual, preparing to land." "Copy, Rescue 11. LZ is cold. We're ready for extraction." The rescue helicopters settled onto the plateau in a storm of rotor wash and noise. Combat rescue officers jumped out, immediately beginning to coordinate the extraction. The SEAL team quickly loaded Brennan into the first helicopter. Kestrel lingered, looking at her damaged aircraft. "We'll recover it," one of the rescue officers assured her. "Tomorrow with heavy lift." "Take care of her," Kestrel said. "She saved our lives tonight." The flight back to base was anticlimactic after everything they'd been through. Kestrel sat in silence, watching the mountains slide past below. They'd completed the mission. They'd gotten everyone out alive. But she couldn't shake the feeling that they'd been seconds away from disaster at a dozen different points. When they landed at the base, Admiral Webb was waiting on the tarmac. He approached as Kestrel climbed out of the helicopter. "Lieutenant Commander Vance," he said formally, then his expression softened. "Revenant, that was extraordinary flying." "We lost the helicopter, sir. We got our asset and every single operator back alive," Webb countered. "The helicopter can be replaced, they can't. You made decisions tonight that saved lives, that's what matters." Kestrel nodded, too tired to argue. Hardison and his team approached, and despite their exhaustion, they stood at attention. "Ma'am," Hardison said, "the team wanted you to know you're welcome on our operations anytime. You flew like a demon and thought like a SEAL. That's the highest compliment we can give." "I flew like a mother who wanted to go home," Kestrel said simply. "But thank you. You made my job easier by being the best at yours." Debrief lasted 3 hours. Kestrel walked through every decision, every moment of the flight, every choice made under pressure. The intelligence officers took notes. The operations staff asked technical questions. Webb listened to everything with the intensity of someone learning a master class in tactical aviation. When it was over, Kestrel returned to her temporary quarters. She stripped off her flight suit, showered, and collapsed onto the bed. Her phone buzzed, a text message somehow making it through. It was from her mother, who was watching the kids. "Emma wants to know if you'll be home for her school play Friday. Christopher says he loves you. Sleep well, sweetheart." Kestrel typed back with trembling fingers. "I'll be there. Tell them I love them more than the sky." She set the phone aside and closed her eyes. Tomorrow she'd write the official report. Tomorrow she'd face questions about the lost helicopter. Tomorrow she'd begin planning her return home. But tonight she could rest. She'd done what she always did. She'd brought everyone home. She was a revenant after all. Death couldn't hold her. Nothing could. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. Kestrel was in the maintenance hangar, examining the recovered MH-60M and documenting damage for her report when a group of pilots approached. They were from the Carrier Strike Group, the elite aviators Webb had originally wanted for the mission. Their leader, a commander named Rowlands, looked uncomfortable. "Lieutenant Commander Vance," he said, "we wanted to talk to you." Kestrel wiped hydraulic fluid from her hands. "Commander, we heard about the mission, about the extraction, the emergency landing, everything." He paused. "We also heard that Admiral Webb had asked for our squadron initially and that command sent you instead." "That's right. We wanted you to know," Rowlands continued, "that we were wrong. When we heard a patrol pilot was taking the mission, we laughed, made jokes about it. We thought it was a mistake." He met her eyes. "We were the mistake. What you did last night, navigating those mountains in zero visibility, holding hover under fire, bringing that damaged bird down safely, that was world-class flying. We couldn't have done it better. Probably couldn't have done it at all." The other pilots nodded agreement. One of them, a young lieutenant, stepped forward. "Ma'am, my father was in a helicopter that went down in the Atlantic 12 years ago, fishing vessel rescue. The pilot pulled him from the water, got him home alive. He still talks about it." Kestrel felt her breath catch. "What was your father's name?" "Robert Chen. He was the mate on the vessel Northern Spirit." "I remember him," Kestrel said softly. "I remember all of them." The lieutenant's eyes were bright. He told me if I ever met the pilot who saved him, I should say thank you. He said she flew like an angel and fought like a demon. When I heard your call sign was Revenant, I knew it was you. The hangar had gone quiet. Other maintenance personnel had stopped working, listening. Your father was brave that night, Kestrel said. He kept the others calm while we were sinking. That helped me focus on getting everyone out. He said you nearly died for them. I did what needed to be done. Same as last night, same as every mission. Rollins extended his hand. If you ever need anything, Lieutenant Commander, anything at all, our squadron owes you. Kestrel shook his hand, then each of the other pilots in turn. As they left, she realized something had shifted. She'd spent 8 years as the overlooked patrol pilot, the single mom who flew groceries and search and rescue missions that nobody glamorized. Now suddenly she was being seen, not just acknowledged but respected. Webb found her an hour later, still in the hangar. "I've been writing my report," he said, "and I realized something. I've been in the Navy for 30 years and I've met a lot of pilots. Fighter jocks who can fly inverted at Mach 2, test pilots who push experimental aircraft to their limits, but I've never met anyone who combines technical excellence with the kind of judgment you showed last night. I just did my job, Admiral." "No," Webb said firmly. "You did something more. You made decisions that saved lives when the easy choice would have been to abort. You held that helicopter together through damage that should have brought it down, and you did it all while thinking about 8 SEALs and a wounded asset who were depending on you." He paused. "I'm recommending you for the Distinguished Flying Cross, and I'm also recommending you for a transfer to our Tactical Aviation Training Command. We need instructors who can teach pilots not just how to fly, but how to think under pressure." Kestrel was silent for a long moment. "Admiral, I appreciate that, truly, but I need to think about it. I have kids who need their mother present, not deployed constantly." "I understand," Webb said, "and whatever you decide, it won't change my assessment of your abilities. You're one of the finest aviators I've ever had the privilege to work with." After he left, Kestrel sat down on the helicopter's cargo ramp, staring at the bullet holes in the fuselage. Each one represented a moment when death had reached for them and missed. Each one was a reminder of how fragile life was, how quickly things could change. Her phone buzzed. Emma's name appeared on the screen. She answered immediately. "Hey, sweetheart. Mom, Grandma said you're coming home." "I am, baby. Day after tomorrow. I'll be there for your play." "I'm playing a tree in the forest scene. It's not a big part, but I worked really hard on my costume." "I'm sure you'll be the best tree that ever stood on a stage," Kestrel said, and she could hear the smile in Emma's voice. "Christopher wants to talk to you." A brief rustle, then her son's voice. "Mom, did you fly helicopters?" "I did, buddy." "Were they fast?" "Pretty fast, but not as fast as you running to greet me at the airport." "I'll run super fast, I promise." "Mom, are you okay? You sound tired." Out of the mouths of 9-year-olds, Kestrel felt tears prick her eyes. "I'm okay, Christopher, just missing you and your sister very much." "We miss you too. Come home soon." "I will. I love you both." "Love you more," Christopher said, and then Emma's voice in the background. "Love you most." "Impossible," Kestrel said, "because I love you more than the whole sky." The call ended, and she sat alone in the hangar, holding the phone like a lifeline. This was why she did it. Not for medals or recognition. Not for the call sign or the respect of other pilots. She did it because she had something worth coming home to, and because she was good enough to ensure that other people made it home to their own families too. The Distinguished Flying Cross ceremony took place 3 weeks later, back in the States. Kestrel wore her dress uniform, the ribbon bar on her chest now including the new decoration. Her children sat in the front row, Emma in her best dress, Christopher fidgeting with his tie. Her mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Admiral Webb presented the award, reading the citation that detailed her actions during the mission. The words sounded strange to Kestrel's ears, formal and distant. They described what she'd done but couldn't capture what it had felt like. The terror and determination and absolute focus required to fly a damaged helicopter to safety. When Webb pinned the medal to her uniform, he leaned close and whispered, "The offer still stands. Training command. Think about it." Then the ceremony was over and Emma and Christopher rushed forward. Kestrel knelt down, gathering them both into a fierce hug. "You look so fancy, Mom," Emma said. "Very official," Christopher agreed, touching the medal carefully. "What's it for?" "For doing my job well," Kestrel said, "and for coming home to you." Later at the reception, Lieutenant Chen approached with his father. Robert Chen was in his 60s now, still strong but with white hair and weathered features. When he saw Kestrel, his eyes widened. "It's you," he said simply. "Hello, Mr. Chen," Kestrel said. "I'm glad to see you well." "Glad to be well, thanks to you." He took her hand in both of his. "My son told me you received the DFC. I wanted to be here to see the Navy finally recognize what I've known for 12 years. You're a hero." "I'm a pilot," Kestrel corrected gently. "One who believes everyone deserves to go home." "My family got to stay whole because of you," Chen said. "3 grandchildren I've gotten to watch grow up. Birthdays and holidays and ordinary days that are precious because they exist. You gave me that." Kestrel felt the weight of his gratitude, uncomfortable with it and humbled by it at the same time. "I'm just glad I was there." "So am I," Chen said. "So am I." As the reception continued, Kestrel found herself surrounded by pilots, officers, and personnel who wanted to congratulate her. But her attention kept drifting to her children, who were entertaining themselves by the refreshment table, blissfully unaware of the military protocols surrounding them. Commander Rowlands approached, a glass of champagne in hand. "Have you thought about Admiral Webb's offer?" "I have," Kestrel admitted, and I'm going to accept, but on my terms. I'll instruct at the training command, but I maintain a schedule that lets me be home for my kids' important events. No deployments that last longer than 2 weeks. If the Navy wants my experience, they get it within the boundaries of being a present mother." Rowlands nodded slowly. "That seems fair. Will they agree?" "Webb already has," Kestrel said. "He understands that my ability to fly the way I do comes partly from having something concrete to come home to. Take that away, and you diminish what makes me effective." "Smart man," Rowlands said, "and smart of you to know your worth." Over the next months, Kestrel settled into her new role at the Naval Air Training Command. She taught advanced tactics, emergency procedures, and the mental discipline required for high-stress flying. Her students were initially skeptical. Most of them were fresh from Top Gun programs or carrier operations, convinced they already knew everything worth knowing. Then they flew simulations with her. She would put them in impossible situations, stack failures and emergencies and split-second decisions until they were overwhelmed. And then she would take the controls and show them how it was done. Not with bravado or showmanship, but with calm, methodical problem-solving and an absolute refusal to accept failure as inevitable. This